Hi, and welcome back to the live book launch for Cracking the Code to Success. My name is Greg Roulette, and I'm your host today, and we have brought in 8 of the most incredible authors in this book to teach you all about how you can crack your own code to success, and my next guest is no exception. She's going to be talking to you about some incredible things like emotional dumpster fires. And you might be like, what in the world is that? And how is it going to help me to have more success in my life? And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. She is an expert in neuro leadership, a new brand of leadership. She's an author, a coach, and she's been helping people all over the world to discover how they can be a better leader. All the way from Colorado, I'd love to welcome my good friend, Tracy Martino. How are you doing?
Good, good.
Welcome to Florida.
Thank you. Love it.
It's fun. Today's an exciting day. You got a book out today.
Yeah.
You're teaching live today.
Yeah.
It's kind of exciting, right?
It's exciting.
Yeah, and I heard you just got off the plane like a couple minutes ago.
I did.
So
I
just
love the
rushed you
humidity.
right in.
It's great for my skin.
Great for the hair too, right? I got to be on camera. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Big SAT word we started with, neuro leadership.
Neuro leadership.
So what does that mean? Why is this
It's
important?
a new brand of leadership combining neuroscience with leadership, and it's actually a really good way to help change behavior in leadership today.
Yeah, and I like that. We're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about dumpster fires. I mean, this is going to be fun. I mean, this is not, this is going to be really, really cool today. Before we jump into that, I want to kind of go through your story. You have a really cool, interesting story. So how do you go from, a graduate of University of Wisconsin lacrosse to neuro leadership? So tell me
there's
about
a lot
journey.
there's a lot that happened actually in between that too.
All right, cool.
Well, I would say about 12 years ago, I was in my own emotional dumpster fire.
Okay.
I was living in Chicago as a medical device rep for a cardiology company.
Okay.
I had just had a baby and moved into a new house. And I was on this mission to prove myself.
Okay.
So I was constantly on the go. I was running around. I was driving like a madwoman from case to case. I was completely stressed out. In fact, I thought stress was the new norm. Until one day, I was in a case with a physician, and I felt my heart skip a beat. And then I felt it again. And you wonder if it's like part of when you're a rep with a doctor, you don't know, is this something that I'm overanalyzing?
Right.
So I'm feeling my heart skip a beat. They hooked me up. They said, yeah, you're having some palpitations. So I thought maybe I should just cut out the caffeine and I'll be fine. And so I decided to cut out the caffeine, eat healthy, exercise more, and that still didn't do it. I kept up my way of life because I thought stress was the norm. I had something to prove. I was constantly on the go.
Right.
And I became very reactive to everybody around me. It wasn't very pretty. Even though I was successful, that was the bad part.
Right.
And then fast forward, I ended up in the ER. And because of the palpitations, I ended up in the ER, and I had actually an angiogram.
Oh no. Okay.
Yeah. And then when I'm sitting in the recovery room and I'm looking at my arm, they actually did an approach from here, from my arm, called a radial approach. And I'm looking at that, and I thought, okay, everything I've done so far hasn't really worked. So I have to really take hold of my mind.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I'm experiencing this, how are other leaders experiencing this, and how are their families affected by this? So I decided to get into neuro leadership and study neuroeconomics and neuroscience.
And so what happened once you started studying this? Because you did things that most people would say that's a good lifestyle change, right? You changed your diet, you were exercising. Like, that's usually step one, right?
Yeah.
So cut out the caffeine, cut out the sugar, and you walk around a little bit. you know? But it didn't work.
No. I mean, partially I felt better. I felt healthier. But I was still reacting. I was still not making the best decisions. I was so reactive to my kids and to my husband.
Yeah.
And that wasn't fair.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is that so many people are living in what you're calling the emotional dumpster fire.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to bring that kind of up, is that life isn't getting easier. Life's not getting less complex, it's getting more complex. There's more things fighting for our time and attention, especially if you have kids, you have a husband, you have a business, you have a career. I mean, the stresses are adding up. They're not subtracting from our life.
Absolutely, and especially with all of our electronics, it is constantly increasing. And there's a new phenomenon that's out. Harvard Business Review wrote about it, called collaborative overload. And a lot of executives are seeing that, because you'll have these people who are like me, this type A type personality, who wants to prove themselves, who wants to do better, and they'll take on more with corporations. And that's that collaborative overload, which actually causes them to burn out and get into an emotional dumpster fire.
Yeah, so when you're already stressed out, when you already have too much on your plate, you're saying, give me more, give me more, give me more.
Yes, because there's so many depleted resources in many organizations.
Right.
And so we have this collaborative overload, and then you have clients and customers I see in this emotional dumpster fire.
So an emotional dumpster fire, and guys, if you're full screen real quick, you call it a complete emotional disaster where it's challenging to access your emotional intelligence.
And that's key. I think this first point is really key because we've seen emotional intelligence being talked about since 1990. And what I've seen from a lot of clients is they still aren't more emotional intelligent. They take the emotional intelligence to many corporations that will be involved in their training, but I'm not seeing them be more emotionally intelligent. And I'll talk about that more with the further steps.
Yeah, so let's talk about what emotional intelligence is, because a lot of what we do in life today is emotional intelligence, where everything is happening to us mentally, not as much physically. Like we're not in the farms, like, working for 10 hours. Like we need our emotions in check. We need to be able to make sound decisions based on logic and emotion. And if we have this thing dinging and that thing dinging and your kid's calling and husband wants to know where dinner is, or whatever the situation is, it's robbing us from getting anything done.
Absolutely, because emotional intelligence, the two main points is understanding the emotions of yourself and the emotions of others. Now, science will tell you that we know the intelligence of others, I should say the emotions of others, because as human beings, we have to survive to understand other people just for survival mechanisms. But to understand ourselves and our awareness is really challenging, especially with this going off, that going off, the kids, and your spouse yelling at you. So the self-awareness is the tough part of emotional intelligence.
So how do you become self-aware? Because you're in it, right? Am I foreshadowing
No,
where
that's
we're going
good.
here?
That's good. We're going to through that.
Well, we're really, and kind of the second piece is that you start to sabotage your efforts, right?
Absolutely.
So by thinking that you can take on more, you can do more challenges, you're actually hurting yourself way more than you think that you're actually gaining things.
Yeah, because since you're not aware, you actually go into this part of your brain, the limbic part of your brain. And so you're so stressed out, you actually pull away from that front part of your brain, the executive brain, and you're not able to perform better.
Yeah, so you're suffering in all the areas, right? You're half doing everything instead of 100% doing something.
Well, yeah, that's how you see an increase in almost like an ADD-like activity with people because we're constantly on the go. And there's a lot of details we miss.
Yeah, a lot of details we miss, right?
Well, a lot of times, for example, one of my clients, he was stressed up because he was an emotional dumpster fire. He was looking for his glasses and they were on top of his head. I mean, it's simple.
It's silly as that sounds.
Yeah. It's simple stuff like that.
So I love that. Give me a couple other examples of an emotional dumpster fire that maybe you've gone through yourself or through clients, and sneak in just a little bit. The camera wants to see your face, so come a little closer.
Okay.
So give me a couple cool examples of, well, not cool examples, but a couple of big examples of an emotional dumpster fire.
Well, another one would be is if you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off and they give you the finger. And you just react and you drive faster. That's another one.
That's never happened to you before.
No, it's never happened to me at all.
So again, an emotional reaction.
It's an emotional reaction. You're easily triggered. Yeah. Another one. Gosh, it could be anything where you have 2,000 emails to get back to. You have phone calls to get back to, and then somebody sends you an email, and they've copied your boss on it.
Ooh, those are my favorite.
And then you react and you send like a nasty email back. So you're in that emotional dumpster fire, so you quickly react. Yeah,
and it doesn't help anyone.
That's happened to me. Yeah.
once or twice. I love that. And so when you're in this state, you're in that emotional dumpster fire, you avoid difficult emotions, you don't want to deal with stuff, you start pushing things off. Like you said, you miss some of the details.
Yeah, because you're not aware of it. You don't really want to accept the fact. Let's say again, go back to that example where I got the email or somebody got the email and their boss was copied. You are not willing to take on the emotion of, hey, maybe this is my responsibility. Maybe there's something that I need to look at. What are the lessons learned here? You don't want to deal with those kind of icky emotions, so you'd rather dump them on somebody else. And then actually we go forth something called an emotional virus happens.
Okay.
And that, once you're here, you can spread it through a corporation. It can bring a corporation down.
Yeah, now it's a wildfire.
Right?
Now
it's a wildfire.
Now it's not just a desk fire in your little
Now it's not your emotional dumpster
wastebasket.
fire.
Now it's spreading everywhere. One of the things you said earlier was the first step is kind of self-awareness.
Yes.
Right? Is understanding that you're actually in a dumpster fire.
Yes.
That your dumpster is on fire. How do we become self-aware? Because we're so into it. We're so entrenched. We're so ding, 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 ding. How do we take a step back and become self-aware?
A lot of it is just taking a second to stop. Stop and take out and observe. Now I'm going to jump ahead to something else I do. But the observation is key. Because when we're in emotional dumpster fires, another thing that will happen, we will create a lot of biases in our mind too, and we'll create stories in our mind. And I'm jumping ahead too, as we create stories in our mind, that gets really ugly. So you have to step outside of yourself and look at the bigger picture, because when you're an emotional dumpster fire, you tend to have a narrow frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we're in this emotional dumpster fire, you say that we have an inner communicator.
Oh, inner commentator?
Inner commentator, sorry. It's creating lies about what?
The inner commentator is a funny thing. The inner commentator is like a sports commentator, and this part of your ego will give you a play-by-play commentary about your life. And it's actually funny. So going back to, let's say you're in the emotional dumpster fire, and again, in the case, let's say traffic, your inner commentator will tell you, oh, that guy is purposely doing that to me.
Yeah.
It will lie to you. It will tell you something that's not true.
He cut me off because of something I did.
And in all reality, if you step out of your inner commentator and you say, that's just my inner commentator, you'll realize maybe that person has an emergency.
Yeah.
Maybe he's late to work.
Yeah, or maybe he's just a jerk, whatever it is, right? But so, all right, so we start telling ourselves these lies, but do we start believing these lies?
We tend to believe the lies, and that ends up creating more of beliefs and patterns in the brain, which we eventually need to start to break.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how to break them in just a second. So it starts to create these lies. We start to believe these lies. And you say that it doesn't want peace. It actually likes the drama. Like, we like it because it's creating something.
Yes, we get addicted to it.
Yeah.
It's like creating the soap opera we can't turn off. It's
Yeah.
like we get so excited by this drama, and until, again, you step aside from the inner commentator, and you have to look at that and say, this is not true. This story isn't true. I don't want this.
Yeah. So it doesn't want peace. It wants drama, and we keep creating drama, and we create drama where there is no. It's the soap opera, right? It's creating drama where there is no drama because of the addiction, because of it's the quick hit of sugar, it's the quick hit of the dopamine, whatever it is.
Exactly.
And it keeps causing us, and this is where you were talking about earlier, it becomes the wildfire. It becomes the virus.
It does, and it creates more of that cortisol in our body. And actually, the cortisol you got to watch out for in a stress level. That has a half-life about a day and a half.
Okay.
You don't want that in your system. So yeah, the inner commentator is a really good tool I use for my clients, for them to step out and observe from a detached point of view.
So how do you do
really good tool.
So walk me through that. Walk me through an exercise to actually take a step back and observe this inner commentator.
Inner commentator. Well, if you were my client,
Yeah.
and let's say you got triggered,
Okay.
and we would talk about the trigger, we would then say, I would say, Greg, that is your inner commentator talking. Can you take a step back?
Okay.
And look what the story the inner commentator is telling you, and maybe say, what are the lessons that are learned from this inner commentator? Is there a theme here? Is there patterns and belief systems that go back to that this inner commentator is telling you?
Yeah. And do those patterns go back to childhood?
Absolutely.
Do those patterns go back
to trauma, to childhood? It could go back to so many things.
Yeah, and again, by asking these questions, by taking that step back, we're taking that first step to uncover what those really are. Because I'm assuming we're getting to the fact that there's going to be a root problem for this.
Yes.
That it's not the dinging, it's not the buzzing.
Well,
there's
usually it's a
a
lot of times it's a constant theme.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just keep playing it over
and
over.
You just keep playing it over. And that's why it's good when people work with me, because we can continuously coach. And let's say they get triggered one week and they're in an emotional dumpster fire, I can talk to them on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and say, okay, how are we this week? How are we the next week?
You're able to Monday morning quarterback them. You're able to review the game film again and again and again.
Exactly. And I might ask them, what did your inner commentator tell you this week? What were the stories? And were these stories true or not true? Because it really does help you when you're in any of these stressful situations of the emotional dumpster fire.
Yeah.
You don't take it so like, oh my God, I'm a bad person, this has happened. You can say, this is my inner commentator telling me a story that's not true.
That's really, really powerful. Kind of the third piece from this inner commentator. So they tell you these lies, they compound on those lies. They love drama, but they also love to obsess over things.
Yes, they love to obsess over things. That's because it's, again, those patterns and subconscious belief systems that have occurred. And all this goes back to where we are triggered. Yeah. All of this happens because there's so many different aspects of the emotional dumpster fire that happen because of triggers, because we all have personal triggers.
Yeah. And so what are some examples of triggers?
Wow, there could be so many, again, based on, again, I'm going to keep saying that again, like subconscious beliefs and patterns. Okay. But patterns, I should say triggers. Triggers could be somebody cutting you off. Somebody could be somebody saying, I want to talk to you.
And immediately you go to the negative, immediately go to...
Yeah, because it's interesting. The Neuro Leadership Institute came up with 5 social triggers that cause our brain to go into fight or flight mode. And because our body's always looking for a perceived threat, right, to keep us safe.
Right.
So these 5 social triggers, one of them is status.
Okay.
So if I said to you, I want to talk to you, or if somebody threatens your job position, that's really serious.
It is.
And that person's going to go into a threat position. And they're actually going to go into the limbic part of the brain. They're going to not actually trust you, and they're not going to, further do business with you. They're not going to have better decision making. They're not going to do so many things. Another trigger would be uncertainty, right? Especially in this day and age, in this political system, things can get very uncertain.
Yeah.
And actually, an error message goes off on our brain when we are uncertain.
Okay.
So we have to recruit more from that frontal part of our brain. And another example of one of those 5 triggers is fairness. So, for example, today I took a United flight down here.
Great timing.
I took a United flight down here.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, people's trigger, of course, what happened to that man, I feel bad what happened to that gentleman, but that was a trigger of fairness, because as human beings, we all want things to be fair, whether somebody gets paid equal or not, whether this gentleman got paid, not paid, whether this gentleman was treated fairly or not.
Right.
That's a huge trigger for people. And so many triggers were hit in that whole instance with United Airlines.
Right.
And it's up to us to step back. So, and then as a repercussion of that, I know I'm jumping ahead to something else here too, is that now we've created a bias against United Airlines based on that.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So we have these triggers. So we've talked about some of the examples here. Again, it's taking a step back, observing, and seeing is it pattern recognition of the triggers?
Pattern recognition, yeah, and understanding first that you have a trigger. First of all, let's say you know you have a trigger, and then you have to realize, what does it feel like in the body?
Okay.
Because we can all say, I have a trigger, right? Okay, Greg has a trigger because he doesn't like this book cover or something.
Right.
I'm just giving an example.
Yeah,
it's okay. But we have to understand where it feels like in the body so we can correlate that. So let's say that one of the triggers, going back to somebody cutting you off in traffic, you might feel your shoulders get tense, you might feel sick in the stomach.
Yeah.
That's another awareness. And the next one is writing it down, and so you can compare. I have a trigger of when people cut me off, I get frustrated and I feel it in my stomach. Here's how I currently react. And then I will teach you other skills on how to react in the future.
Yeah, which is what we want to get to, and we're going to get there here. But I love that. So it's first understanding that you have one of these triggers. I love the relating it back to an emotion and how you feel, right? Because that makes it real. Like the pit in the stomach, like the anxiety, the whatever that it is. Now it's real, and then writing it down makes it even more real. And because you really now start to become self-aware that these triggers happen. So let's start to overcome some of this, and as we talk about some of the science and the things that you bring into it, you talk about the electrical power of the heart.
That is huge. That is huge.
What does that mean?
Well, our heart has an electrical field that can be measured up to 10 feet away. Now, the Heart Math Institute, back in 1990, decided to study the power of the heart and how it is in human performance.
Okay.
And they discovered this electrical field. And we discovered that it's 40 to 60% stronger than the brain, and it's the strongest source of bioenergy. So that's huge. So we have all this electrical energy of the heart, and we have the electrical energy of the brain, right? And so what we want to do is combine the two along with our central nervous system to create something called coherence and harmony. When we do that, we're able to move to the frontal part of our brain, the executive function, which is optimal for performance and learning.
So the $1 million question is, how do we do that, right? So how do we tap into this energy? How do we tap into the energy of the heart, of the brain? How do we get to coherence?
Absolutely. One of the first steps is simple as breathing.
Okay.
Breathing is slowing down, taking a deep breath. And then while you do that, you're going to actually focus on the area of the heart.
Okay.
That way, we're all of a sudden actually bringing energy to the heart. Third step would be to focus on feelings of gratitude and appreciation. Now, once you do that, you're going to start to feel yourself calm down. And this actually can be measured with biofeedback.
Okay. So breathing sounds simple.
Sounds really simple.
Sounds really simple.
But you got to do it.
Yeah. And any secret to it? Is it just a deep breath? It's the deep breath with the thinking, obviously, about the heart. But so talk to me about that, because this could be a simple exercise that we could get everybody doing right now today.
Absolutely. Well, it's so simple as inhaling through your nose and exhaling, because the exhalation is going to bring the parasympathetic nervous system down. But the most important thing is attaching a feeling to that. as I'm sitting here feeling to it. Yeah.
Very touchy-feely, yeah.
Feeling to it, yeah.
What kind of feeling? A positive feeling?
Positive
yeah.
of gratitude, appreciation, joy.
And
that makes the difference when you attach that feeling to it.
And again, with the gratitude, does it have to be something huge? Could it be like gratitude that I have fresh air to breathe today,
Absolutely.
or I have hot water in my
It's
shower today? I mean,
simple as that.
something simple,
Yeah,
right? Just
simple as
something
that.
positive and a positive associations you have gratitude for.
Yeah, because biofeedback will show it starts to change the chemistry in the brain,
Yeah.
and also the heart rhythms will start to slow down. Because with heart math and we're measuring heart rhythms, we're looking at something called heart rate variability. And we normally have a heart rate variability where it will beat, we're measuring in between beats.
Okay.
And so we want some of that, but we don't want that to be erratic. Mm-hmm. Because when it's erratic, we're not incoherent.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to measure with that.
Got it. So we're taking a step back. We're seeing these triggers. We're relating it to the emotion. We're starting to become self-aware.
Yes.
Now we're starting to tap into the energy of the heart and the brain
Yes.
to get to coherence. How does, something as simple as a breath exercise help us with our emotional dumpster fire? How do we relate them together?
Because we're pulling energy we're moving from the limbic portion of our brain to our frontal portion of our brain, where we're going to actually have peak performance.
Okay, which is what we want, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and the ability to connect with people, because when you're in an emotional dumpster fire, relationships can be ruined.
Right.
Because you're, like I call it, you're drunk with emotion. And people can't reason or talk to people who are drunk with emotion or when they're in an emotional dumpster fire. So we want to be able to move them and actually navigate and shift that brain activity from the limbic portion to the frontal portion.
Nice, I like it. And it starts with something as simple as your breath.
It does start with that, yeah.
Yeah, and anything else that we can do? Any other exercises or things that we should be thinking about to move that energy?
Well, a lot of it is prepping beforehand too. Like if you're going to go into a charged situation, or even coming here to film this, I practiced my heart-focused breath.
Okay.
And it actually helped calm it down with, and
Yeah.
it's a very simple thing to do.
Right, but again, so I think that was good. So it's the prepping, right?
the prepping.
So a lot of us wait till it's too late. Right? It's like, oh my God, I'm in this emotional dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Now, and yes, now we have to solve the problem. We got to put the fire out.
Yeah.
But I love what you said about prepping, because before we go into that meeting with the boss, before that we, know that we're going to get home and our house is going to be chaos.
True.
You can prep yourself before you get into these situations.
Yeah.
And really save yourself from having that fire,
Yeah.
get
And
huge.
actually during it, if you're aware that you're an emotional dumpster fire, now that you have these tools of the inner commentator and the tools of the heart intelligence, what we're talking about, then while you're in the moment, if you all of a sudden get skilled enough, you can stop and say, wait a minute, I'm going to use heart coherence. Now this actually happened to me once, because you actually have the power to change the energy in the room.
Okay.
So when all of a sudden you have coherence, I can shift it with you and everybody else in this room. So it did happen once with my family. My daughter was emotional. She was an emotional dumpster fire, and my husband, my whole house was in it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I chose to do my heart-focused breath and be coherent. And actually I felt this shift in the room. It was really cool.
And so talk to me a little. So you do the breath. You feel the shift in the room. What does that mean? What is that? How does that change the situation?
It's changing the electrical field in the room. I mean, since you can measure from 10 feet away,
Yeah.
you actually feel the shift.
So does your daughter start to calm down?
She
or
did.
whatever.
She started to calm down, and everybody started to reason more, right?
Which is great. That's
Yeah.
a great first step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing you can do, there's something called freeze frame, whereas if you're in a situation and, okay, my daughter, for example, let's say she was in her emotional dumpster fire and she's flipping out, I'm going to freeze that for a second. I might not engage her right away. I'll walk away for a little bit, get coherent between my mind and my heart,
Yeah.
and then come back to the situation.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I think people just want to keep engaging and re-engaging the situation when actually you have to freeze frame that and walk away.
Powerful. You've given everybody two really, really powerful tools: the breathing, the freeze frame. Great first steps. As we keep talking about the heart and coherence with this emotional dumpster fire, talk to us about all of these things on the second half of the slide: the chaotic HRV, the increased SNS. So what's happening here?
So when you are in an emotional dumpster fire, your heart actually, we talked about the heart rate variability, and now that's
Yeah.
when the heart is actually erratic, right? And we said we're measuring spaces in between beats.
Right.
But we don't want the chaotic.
Right.
Because when you're here, you're actually in that limbic portion of the brain. So we have an increased sympathetic nervous system. That's when we're all stressed out. We
Yeah.
might feel like it's hard to breathe, the pit in our stomach, all sorts of things go out in our nervous system. And then here, actually, studies have shown with the chaotic heart rate variability, we have an increased risk for diseases.
Okay.
A lot of physicians are using this as a marker for disease now. And that's something we all need to look at.
Right.
So I will point out here, getting back to triggers. So let's say somebody gets triggered, right? What they did in one of the heart math studies is they hooked a husband and wife up to some biofeedback.
Okay.
And one of them got triggered. Actually, it was the husband who got triggered. And his heart rate jumped from 55 to 160.
Wow.
So you can see how quickly, when we have a trigger, how we react to that.
Yeah.
Now, what happens in the system when that happens, there's something called interleukin 7, and that's an inflammation marker in the body. That inflammation stays in the body for 72 hours. So that's pretty profound. So when we get triggered, we got to be aware of those triggers, because look what happens to the body, right?
And if the triggers keep happening,
Yeah.
it never leaves the body.
Yes. Yes. So think about why we have so much disease. And getting back to my beginning story, if we go way back to the beginning,
Yeah.
that's probably what happened to me.
Right, because every day a new fire, well, probably multiple times a day you were getting
Absolutely.
fired. Triggers were going off
Yes.
at 6 a.m. when the alarm goes off. It was going off when you got to the office.
Yes.
It was going off all day long.
Yeah.
It was shooting all these levels up. It was shooting your heart
You're
rate
solving
up.
everything for
Hey,
me now, see?
I'm thinking, well, I'm trying
No,
to,
you're right,
I'm trying
you're right.
to regurgitate
Yeah,
it all
yeah.
because I want people to understand that you
Yeah.
were having, it's not that you have, it's not one event.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like, oh, at 3 o'clock on Tuesdays, I get an emotional dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening at all hours of the day, and if this stuff is getting into our body, and you're saying like 72 hours, another one you said like for a day, these things aren't leaving because we're just amplifying it.
Absolutely.
And that's where the things like disease comes in. The next one you're going to touch on, shutting down parts of your brain. I mean,
Exactly.
Now I can't make decisions. Now I can't lead my team. Now I can't be the mom I need to be or the dad I need to be because my brain isn't functioning.
Mm-hmm. And then I was a sales rep, so you tend to get more reactive as a sales rep, and you tend to take things more personal. I mean, think about that. You're a sales rep and you're trying to work with clients, and especially at a hospital situation, and you have a physician yelling at you, you have to get out of the emotional dumpster fire to be able to build trust with that physician.
Yeah.
So
we're seeing, and if I'm jumping ahead,
No.
let me know. But when we talk about things like increased risk for disease, we're seeing the rate of cancer going up. We're seeing all these other diseases coming up, diabetes going up, and it's almost directly proportional to the amount of stress that we have going on in our life, to the amount of emotional dumpster fires, as you're calling it, going on in our life.
Yeah.
And so going back to the fact that life isn't going to get easier, right?
We're always going to get triggered.
We're always going to get triggered, but it's knowing what to do with the triggers, like the breathing, like the freeze frame, like having some of these tools in our back pocket. That's the way to escape these fires and extinguish them. Because
Exactly.
you're always going to have them.
Yeah.
Some guy's always going to cut you off. Someone's always going to text you on Friday at 4:55 and cancel their account.
Yeah.
Something like it's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, but it's knowing how to react in those situations. Is that an accurate statement?
It's knowing how to react and knowing how to step away and observe.
Okay.
And knowing what the lessons are with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. So so all these bad things are happening, right?
Yeah.
But when we start to get to that coherent state, which you talked about earlier, good things happen.
Absolutely. When we are in a coherent state, it actually means harmony, right? And so it opens up the executive brain. Therefore, when we're in the executive brain, we're actually open up chemicals, neurochemistry in the brain. We have dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all these bonding hormones so you can have a good conversation.
Right.
And we're actually able to make better decisions and innovation. We have increased performance because of that, increased healthcare. Your healthcare costs will go down.
Right, because you're not showing up to the doctor with all this crazy stuff all the
Mine
time.
did.
Yeah.
And improved hormone balance.
So I'm going to flip this back to your story, right? So you started telling the story of you changed your diet, you changed a little bit of the fitness, you changed some of that stuff. What was it that you ultimately did that got you to the state where you are now? Like what was it that really helped you to be more in this coherent state?
Yeah, a lot of it was practicing the heart intelligence, taking time to settle down, taking time to breathe. And the tool of the inner commentator was key for me. I would stop myself, understand what my triggers were. I would stop myself and say, is this really a true statement? For example, if somebody walked by me and gave me a mean look, I wouldn't say, oh my God, what did they do to me? What are they doing? I look at that and I just say, hey, that's just a situation. That has nothing to do with me. Because my life showed many patterns, and it showed many, I should say, flashcards of lessons I was supposed to learn. So I'd go back to my own tools that I'm teaching and I'm passionate about right now.
Yeah. And so are you at a state where you are at a coherent state? Are you always working on this stuff? Are you always?
You still have to sometimes go back to it. You know, I'll get triggered. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. My God.
Yeah, you're getting triggered on the regular.
Yeah. Well, she knows what buttons to push.
Yeah.
She knows, but I have to. Am I allowing her to push those buttons? Yeah.
That's powerful. So we're always working on it because again, the triggers are going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but it's working on it, having some of these tools like the breathing exercise, the freeze frame exercise, some of these things, they start to bring us back down.
Absolutely.
Right. Which is what we really want to do. There's a lot of people out there who are in these states and they haven't been able to recognize the triggers. They haven't been able to recognize the patterns. They haven't been able to, get to the place where you are today. How do you help someone in your work, whether it's through coaching or the programs that you offer? How do you help someone to, understand and recognize some of these things?
Yeah, my program is called Executive Returns, and I incorporate a lot of these tools in there. I will even start by, first of all, going back and focusing. I do focus on what is their triggers. We spend a large time on triggers and patterns. And then we actually look at how they frame their life. And that might sound
what does that
so
mean?
simple,
Let's talk about
but
that.
a lot of us will look at our life in a very narrow frame based on biases, because we all have a brain, so we're all going to have biases.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of times how we see our life, and I'm going to explore that and try to open up this frame and see if we can take that from a different angle.
Yeah.
And I do use the inner commentator, I do use the heart math, and there's a new tool that I will be using called conversational intelligence, which actually helps inspire conversation and actually helps build trust.
Nice. I like that. And so you start by working with someone by identifying some of these things, using some of these tools. I love the second thing you have here. Know who's in charge. Right? Sometimes your daughter, I'm sure, thinks she's in charge. But it's understanding who's in charge. What does that mean? And how do you help people to take charge?
That's, again, going back to the inner commentator. Because if we are in that emotional dumpster fire, we sometimes really don't know who's in charge. We are at our wit's end. And so you have to pull yourself back and be aware and say, wait a minute, that's my inner commentator talking.
Yeah.
And so you have to know you're in charge, not this ego portion, these stories that you told yourself. That's done.
Yeah. And so someone's watching right now, they're listening, they're like, man, I have triggers going off all the time. I'm my life right now, just even trying to block out 30 minutes to watch this right now.
Yeah.
My phone's dinging, my texts are going off. So what is this process like working with you? Is it one-on-one, or they come and see you? Is it a one-time?
I do one-on-one, I do group coaching, I also do corporate workshops, I come to corporations. But I think the most effective is one-on-one.
Okay.
When you spend one-on-one time with me, maybe weekly or bi-weekly, yes. I can talk, yes. You get to what really the issue is, because it's so easy with even breathing. Okay, I'll remember to breathe, and you don't always do the heart focused breath, but it's important for somebody to hold you accountable.
Right.
Saying, okay, your triggers were this week. What were they? How did you react?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll help executives. Even they might get triggered with an email, and they'll say, Tracy, how do you think I should rewrite this? How can I make this sound so I don't sound so emotionally charged? And I talk about that exact situation in the book. Yeah,
which is, we all do that, right? And with email, you can't read tone, you can't read body language, you can't read anything, and it always reads worse than it might have sounded. Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of times I help them actually deconstruct conversations. And I'll look at them, I'll say, are you coming from an I perspective or a we perspective when you're talking to somebody? Are you trying to co-create a conversation, or is this all about you telling, yelling, and selling? Yeah. So I love it. Who's a good fit for you? Who's the person that you really want to help to overcome some of these emotional dumpster fires? Oh, these burnt out executives who face collaborative overload. Yeah. I mean, that's really important, because once I help them, I'm actually helping their families in an indirect level. And probably their teammates, their employees, the people that they work with, because if I'm at a more balanced emotional state, well, again, like you said, I'm not an emotional mess to my kids. I'm not reacting to my wife when they're doing these things, but then to my teammates, my employees, I'm able to be a better leader to them. Absolutely, because then you're more aware of the other leadership tools, like I have to be inclusive, I have to be aware of what kind of bias and what kind of people am I hiring. Because if you're in an emotional dumpster fire and you're trying to hire somebody, how does that work? Yeah. So there's a lot of things that these tools help. What are some, if we want to learn more about the neuroleadership stuff, some of these things, are there other resources or things out there that are on the cutting edge? The Neuroleadership Institute. Yeah. Absolutely. I would definitely go to there. Yeah. Or give me a call, check out my website. Yeah, I think that's the better place for them to call, is to get someone like you. And so what's that first step? Is it just jumping on the phone with you? Is doing a 15-minute consultation with me. Okay. And what do you try to get across in those couple minutes? Just to kind of see where they're at, just to see... where they're at, want to see if we're a fit.
it.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you want to make sure that you can help them.
Exactly.
Right? Which
exactly.
is exactly what it is. So for someone that's listening today, I'm going to talk more about how they can get in touch with you in just a second. If someone's watching this right now, first step for them to take, is it taking that step back? Is that the first action step that you want them to take today?
The first action step is really being aware of those triggers. I can't tell you how important that is. I mean, that you have to step back and say, I know I'm feeling stressed and I know my body's reacting in certain ways. What caused that?
Yeah.
And you have to look back and say, what was that trigger? Why am I so triggered? And maybe take some time and say, okay, maybe there's patterns here I wasn't really looking at, or there's a subconscious belief I've had for years that I've been battling.
Is it as simple as maybe like an Evernote file where you're just knocking, maybe a journal that you're writing in, just to, again, keep track of it? Because you probably want to keep track of it over a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Because again, you want to see the patterns.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So journaling,
writing it down,
and then seeing does it happen every morning at 8:45 because the same guy cuts you off every day? Is it is it the same person that sends you the email? Is it the same sound? What are the feelings? You want to have that, right?
Because once you identify those triggers, I would like to go back with that person and say, is it more of a status trigger for you? Is it a trigger of autonomy or certainty or fairness? Mm-hmm. What is this big trigger that keeps setting you off? And then we can dive deeper into that.
Yeah.
And then use other tools to help,
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that you do is helping them to identify some of those patterns.
Yes.
Because I might not be able to understand that all of these things are interrelated, right? Yeah. And then what do I do about it? And then how maybe it's something from my past or it's something from here, and that's something that you're able to, as an expert in this work, you're able to see the things. Again, it's the coach analogy, right?
Yeah.
I'm in the game. I'm the quarterback. I got to call the play and I got to run it.
Exactly.
You're on the field seeing the defense and you're seeing all the changes and you're able to really say, no, Greg, run this play.
Yeah. Well, exactly, because I'm the one standing outside observing.
Yeah.
As you're in there doing all this stuff, I can kind of see from a different angle what's going on.
Yeah, I love it. TracyMartino.com, best place for them to go. They can learn more. They can fill out the contact form. They can get on the phone with you, 15-minute consultation, where Tracy can start to work with you using some of her expertise in neuro leadership and everything that we've talked about today in her own life. You saw how she went through this herself. You saw how it was affecting her work. It was affecting her relationship with her kids. It was affecting her relationship with her spouse. Went to the doctor. Health concerns coming from it. I'm not trying to pile on you and pick on you right now. But the great thing is you saw it and you tried to make the changes. And as leaders, as type A's, as people who are making a difference in the world, we need someone with that outside perspective to really coach us, to hone us in, to make sure that we're running the right plays, to make sure that we take a step back and we can read the defense so that we can execute. We can get the touchdown. I'm using the football analogy, but it's a nice, easy, good one here. And so make sure that you take that time. Spend 15 minutes on the phone with Tracy. What do you have to lose? Because tomorrow another trigger is going to go off. As soon as we end this recording, another trigger is going to go off. Maybe it went through while you were watching this here today. The triggers aren't going to stop. But what needs to stop is how you react to those triggers, how you see those triggers, and what you do about it. How you get your brain and your heart working together, how you move stuff from the back of the brain to the front of the brain, how you have that emotional connection, create that coherence, and move forward so that you can be a better leader to your team, to your teammates, to your board of directors, to your boss, to whoever it is. How you can be a better father, a better wife, a better husband, a better, whatever it is in your family situation. That's who you want to be. And that's why you're working hard in the first place, right? Yeah. And if you're not, now's the time to make a change. TracyMartino.com is where you can go ahead and do that. This is fun.
Yeah.
I'm getting charged up. I'm like, now I want to know what my triggers are. So I'm going to be on the phone with you for 15 minutes. That's awesome. Any parting words before we take a break here?
I'm just very happy to be here to have the opportunity.
I love it. Well, awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank
New book coming out today.
Yes, that's exciting.
TracyMartino.com is where you can learn more. And if you haven't yet, make sure you head on over to Amazon.com. Get a copy of her brand new book, Cracking the Code to Success. And stop these emotional dumpster fires, guys. I mean, come on. We don't need any of these more in our life. We have a few minutes left. Do you want to take some questions?